Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're already over 60 people, so I think let's start going. We have another very relevant webinar today in the mobility community. You know, the big topic about the Chinese OEMs, their strategy, is something we'll be discussing with our key expert. So welcome to the session today. As you know, this is part of an entire series of the mobility community. So if you are not part of the community, just go and log in into Chorus website and you can join and you'll get information about all our events. So with that, let's go directly into today's agenda. We will start after this introduction with an expert insight about our partners from CBA, who will give you the latest on the industry trends around Chinese OEMs. And then we have two very relevant industry perspectives from our very relevant companies like BNP Paribas Personal Finance and Allianz Partners. We'll have conversation, questions, and of course, we'll really open discussion, not only with our speakers as a panel, but also from the audience. So we will welcome all your questions. And with that, we'll wrap up in an hour. So just as a reminder, our speakers today, as you've seen on the website, we have Ronnie Seidel from BNP Paribas Personal Finance and Christophe Di Perna from Allianz Partners. They will introduce themselves during the conversation. And we are supported by our partners from CBA, Marcus Collet as partner in Europe and Qing Gao as partner in Asia. So thank you very much for joining. Just remember to be part of the session. The environment is Teams, so feel free to ask any questions directly in the chat or ask questions. And we will be also posting some questions in the poll to get your input about how you are seeing this topic, how it's affecting your company, your clients. And with your input, we'll also have a better discussion. We will enrich the discussion with our speakers. So without further ado, given the high, I see demand for the session, we have over 75 people already connected. Let's go and start with our first Slido poll. You have there the QR code, or you have the QR code on the session. You can also click on the Slido link directly, or just slido.com and you can enter the number. And it's really to gather your perspective, right? How do you think the OEM market share in Europe will be in the next, from 5 years from now? So we are really looking forward on how your input, and then we will use this as part of the conversation with our industry experts. So Marcus, I will start handing it over to you to have a first look at the Slido results and starting the conversation with our first speaker.
Yes, yeah, thanks a lot, and hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar. And I think the results are unfolding. It's still moving a bit, but I think it's already a safe bet that there's an expectation that market share goes more to the lower end, 15 to 25%, not less than 15%. No? So I think it's going to be sizable. It's not going to be more than a quarter. Some are a bit more pushy. I must admit, I was a bit more pushy on this in terms of 25 to 35%. There seem to be some who go above 35%. So it's correcting a bit. But obviously, I mean, an interesting point, I mean, I think we showed this in one of the last sessions, is if you take Australia, it's an interesting benchmark. And in Australia, market share of Chinese is currently at about 17.1%. So you see that if you have an unlimited entry of Chinese in a market, this can be really radical. Now the question obviously is not only the products, it's also how the Chinese will get the horsepower on the tarmac in Europe, but then there's also a question of regulation. So I think now it's stabilized. So most say it's going to be 15 to 25%, so not more than a quarter. But now the second one is actually more, up to 35%. So taking away from this slide, probably one thing, it's going to be very significant because it means it's going to change the European OEM landscape and vehicle landscape. So I think that's a good entry point for entering into our discussion to see how all of this will unfold. Back to you, Sylvia.
Perfect. So thank you for that, Marcus. Thank you for everyone who shared their views. And let's now move over to actually Marcus together with Chin to give your expert view on the industry before interviewing our participants. So Chin, Marcus, all over to you.
Great. Shin, I don't see your little sticker on the list. Are you in?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. Hi, Mark.
Okay, great, Shin. Thanks
Hi,
a lot.
guys.
So very happy to welcome our colleague and partner from China, Shin, because we have been talking a lot about the European vision of how things unfold, but obviously Shin is where things happen, where Chinese have built a significant success in the Chinese country based on their price point, but also based on technology leadership, also based on new ways of production. So really looking forward to also listen. And I always listen with a lot of attention when Shin talks about China. Always something to learn. So really waiting with a lot of anticipation on what Shin is gonna say. Please, Shin, go
Yeah,
ahead.
okay, thank you. I prepared a few short slides. I just share my screen. Can everybody see it?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
perfect. That's good. I mean, it's a short
Shin, sorry.
conversation, but
Yeah, now it's
just
in full mode. Thank you. Thank you very much.
thank you very much. I mean, just so first of all, it's really an honor to join this webinar to share our CV China perspective on the Chinese OEM, the captives. They're changing rules in the auto game. To cut things short, I prepare a few slides just to elaborate on our views and our thoughts. But please do not limit it what I just shared. Any questions, comments, please kindly raise it up. We could exchange more details. So first, I would like to sort of explain, just give a sharing on the Chinese OEMs, the overseas sales. So this chart shows the exports for June, January and July this year. In terms of sales, again, like Cherry maintained the number one place, but but in very notably, like the BYD is chasing very heavily and pretty close. Our estimation is BYD this year will be pretty close with Cherry. But Cherry most likely going to maintain its first place as 23rd consecutive years in terms of overseas sales. But for the rest of the Chinese OEMs, they are also catching up. And also, if you look at the key export markets as well as the overseas market expansion, majority of the key or leading Chinese OEM going overseas, they aiming on the global markets. Well, the Europe, the SEA, Latin America, Australia, Asia Pacific, all they are looking. All these key markets of auto sales are their targets. And more importantly, they all set up very high, targets, which some of them are their 2025 targets. For example, like BYD, they set up 1 million overseas sales for this year by 2025. I think they're most likely going to achieve it. And GD also like around 600,000. So what this slide just show that there's a very strong trend that those Chinese OEM is trying to take a significant share of the global auto sales, and it is happening. And then, because we've been helping quite a lot of captives in China to help them on various topics. And I think there's also a trend that those captives are following their OEMs to going overseas in different aspects, in the different in any shape or forms. They could not set up their own overseas branches, but they could use many ways leveraging their capabilities. So there just give you sort of understanding of our summary about the captives in China, their core capabilities are more. Well, we define it as we summarize it as the product innovations, OEM finance integrations, channel penetration, and risk management, as well as the digital. This all can be fully or partially leveraged when they move into the global markets. So, for example, the product innovation can more tailored financial products, financing integration, working closer with OEMs, and channel penetration, looking at more tiered channel management framework, risk management, the structure design and so on. And more importantly, the digital end-to-end digital services, and also the end-to-end data traceability and analytics across the customer journey. So there's more to say, but we believe that this kind of capability will be fully leveraged when they are following the OEM's footprints. And then some sort of strategic directions of those AFCs. So they are chasing some differentiated strategy around the business development, internal management, and operational support. For example, the business structure transformation is more looking at core offerings and expanding into high potential segments. Again, also accelerate overseas expansions. Some of them are already start some engagements in certain markets, including the Europe, SEA, and so on. And the channel management evolution, looking at the strength in digital operation, deepen integration with the EV value chain, and so on, and the customer value, enhancements, looking at the customer engagement system to explore additional business growth for existing customers. And internal management, I think this also a lot of leading OES leading EFCs in Europe, what they are doing, what you guys are doing. So it's pretty much the same. They are catching up, or they are doing more in the excellent way. And more importantly, the operational support, looking at technology innovation. This is where we have seen a lot of investment in the last few years, which really identify a lot of quite a few leading players that such as Cherry FS, as well as like Yixin and Genius, and potentially some other players. This is where the great efforts have been spared, and great investments has been made, and also together with great achievements, which some of the applications, I think some of applications is also a very good reference for the European players. I've been exchanging this with Marcus, and we believe there's really quite a few fascinating things that the AFCs in China are doing, which can be leveraged in Europe. I think they are, and this gives you some ideas about what they are doing in the AI applications, like for example, in the internal management, in the compliance monitoring, technology development, and sales and marketing, of course. The product design, risk management, credit assessment, pretty much covers all the value chain of the auto finance business. So this is something I think will be we've been based on my exchange with those AFCs when they're going overseas. They're gonna bring this capability together with them, which will help them to build up a very core differentiated, positioning in the market competition. I mean, for the sake of time, I'll just quickly, introduce about the views. Marcus, please feel free to add, and any questions, please feel free to raise it up. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Shin. I think it was very illustrative. Thank you for all the facts you have shared with us. And yes, please, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat, and we'll be addressing those during the panel, right, Marcus? I think maybe we can move now to interviewing our first industry speaker. And Shin, if you could stay for the panel, that would be great, and we'll consolidate all the answers for the questions coming in. So with that, please, let's go over to Ronnie with Marcus.
With Emilia, actually.
Yes, so it's going to be with me.
With Emilia, that's fine too.
Okay, we're flexible.
Yeah, so I think so with Ronnie, obviously BNP PF have worked with a lot of these captive and Chinese OEM players, both I think from discussions in China, but also specific markets in Europe, where we see partnerships continuing to grow. And so I think one of the first questions is, obviously we've heard from Shin's perspective of what he sees in China and what they're doing in China. But when you look at it from a European bank perspective, what do you see as the main kind of differences, both in terms of their expectations towards their partners, but also their existing capabilities versus some of the more traditional European players that we know?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you for having me. You're right, BNP Paribas is working with a number of players in China, but also in Europe. And I think the first element to have in mind is probably just to remind what makes Europe so specific. First, Europe is a very competitive market. Second, regulation is unpredictable in most of the countries, but also on European level. And it's a market which is not growing. It has not
Yeah.
been growing for the past years. It's probably not going to grow for the next years. And the last point, and I think this is very important, especially when we talk to Chinese partners, that Europe does not exist. Europe is the sum of individual countries with very specific local realities. In particular, when it comes to regulation, when it comes to financial services, and how users are going to consume financial services. So that makes it a little bit complicated to start in Europe. Then we have a look at the different players which arrive in Europe, Chinese, but also from other countries. We can see two different strategies. One is more short-term, and the other one is probably more long-term oriented. Short-term is very simple, is making sales no matter what price. So pushing fleet and rental cars. And then you have a more long-term oriented basis, and those manufacturers start rather from a retail perspective. They try to build a big quality dealer network, and they take care of after sales being very important for retail sales, but even more so for fleet sales. And this is what we try to explain to the different manufacturers, depending on how they want to position themselves in the market, what they need to do. And then when it comes to financial services, auto finance is obviously very important. The first point, and I think we don't talk about it enough, is about financing stocks. The average dealer quality in Europe has been decreasing over the last 2 years with increasing interest rates, but also with buybacks coming back, especially in some markets. So this means stock financing for dealers is very important. It's a condition to make manufacturers successful, legacy manufacturers, but also the new ones. And the second one, obviously, is supporting sales. And supporting sales for the retail side, I think there's a number of players in Europe who can do it well on a local basis, on a pan-European basis, on a more standardized basis, or on direct and fleet sales. And I think on BNP Paribas side, we talk about BNP Paribas Mobility. We're probably the only pan-European player who has a very strong setup on retail, but also corporate and fleet sales. So this helps to have sufficient and satisfying channel segments where we can help those new manufacturers to start exploring the European market, and again, differently, market by market.
And when you look at it from a BNP PF perspective, obviously they're in different stages in terms of how advanced they are, as you said, in their rollout strategy. But from a partnership perspective, do you see a different economic model that's required with these new entrants, or in the end, is it relatively similar to your existing partnerships?
It's slightly different because what makes it different that is and I think Xin mentioned it quickly. Captives in China are very important, but captives in China are not exclusive. So in China, manufacturers can work with their own captive, but they can subsidize other finance companies as well. This works probably rather well in a standard loan market with a growing market overall. It's much more complicated in Europe. And I think that coming back to the long-term orientation of some of the manufacturers, it's very important to take into account the very specific European market with the leasing products and the balloon products. This means when we take together industrial risk on residual values, more integrated captive approach is very important. So it's not a tactical cooperation, it's not a short-term vision, but we would like to build long-term strategic cooperations with those manufacturers. Some start to understand it. It's always complicated at the beginning because each manufacturer has to build so many things at the same time, and there can be, let's say, a short-term vision on financial services, but over time, each of them is understanding also thanks to the feedback from the dealer networks.
Okay, clear. And I think you touched on one point there, which is around sort of the residual value risk used car longevity, which I think has been more of a concern at the beginning on the capability of the cars. I think the perspective on at least the new car manufacturing has improved, but I think there still is this doubt in the market because anyway there's a structural kind of EV residual value uncertainty, which is even stronger on some of the Chinese brands. You mentioned obviously kind of having more long-term integrated partnerships as one way to manage that. But how else do you actively treat that, or do you actively treat that, or is that just a risk that comes as a function of working with these new players?
Yeah, I think residual values is a very important topic. And as you mentioned, it's more a long-term orientation. Normally, historically, residual values are based on what we know, so in past values, and not in forecasts. It makes it very complicated. It made it complicated already on battery electric vehicles and PHEVs, because there is no history and technology is evolving, and this is the same for new manufacturers. So there is some prudency in the residual value setting. But I would say, one second. I'm sorry, you see that residual values is a very, very complicated topic.
Yeah, but Alice,
on ICE, I think it's rather easy because technology is mature, and then it's more a question of quality or not. And we shall see in 3 to 4 years' time after the launch of the brand, what's the quality of the vehicles. And there, again, this is a conversation to be had with all the manufacturers. A consistent and structurally prudent pricing policy is very important to manage residual values. It's very difficult to understand at the beginning, but it's something we try to repeat because residual values are based on predictability. So if list prices and retail prices are not predictable and move a lot, and this will impact residual values immediately. So I would say for ICE, it's more the pricing policy which is important. On battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids, it is basically the market, which is still uncertain because we do not know where the volumes will be. We will not know for at least a month what the regulation will be for the next years to come and where we will be in 2035. Technology still evolves, so there might be some evolutions in terms of technology and impact the resale market of electric vehicles. This is what we have seen on plug-in hybrids. The first generation of plug-in hybrids with very low autonomy is quite difficult to sell today. It might be more easy when you have 100 kilometers of autonomy, and the batteries, we know that the batteries are keeping up well. But this is something we should see over the next, let's say, next years. And then both legacy and Chinese manufacturers need to have a look on the impact of regular updates, because today buyers are interested in new models, let's say more technology-driven models also with interfaces. But again, when we want to sell residual value products, we need to sell them for 2, 3, or 4 cycles. This means technology needs to evolve, but even in 5 years or 7 years from now, the car still needs to be attractive to the market and to the used car buyers.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. I'm just going to pick up one question in the chat just because it feeds in quite nicely at this point. There was a question, is there no RV reference point in China which could be used? As I understand, that's because the maturity of RV-based products, i.e. leasing, is very low in China, but it would be great if you just confirm that one.
Yeah, from my perspective, the Chinese market is very different. It's not the residual value market. And the organization itself between new car sales and used car sales is very different as well. So used cars are mostly sold through specialist networks, either online or what we call the car supermarkets. So this means this multi-cycle approach, which manufacturers have in Europe, including used car labels, does not exist. So the Chinese manufacturers learn with us in most of the cases the importance of residual values and how to keep up over time the value of the vehicles.
Okay, no, that's great. So maybe just we end with one last question, because everyone always likes to know about lived experiences. I think if there's of the players, whether that's in China or in Europe, Chinese players that you have worked with as BNP, is there one which you would say from your perspective has been particularly successful, where that may be volume driven, it may be the economic model, it may be the speed of delivery, but where you would say that's an example of a partnership that's worked well, from these sort of more nascent opportunities that are growing in the market?
Maybe I can give you two examples. The first one is Link & Co. We have a multi-country cooperation of Link & Co. Link & Co has been in Europe with one model and rather a subscription basis, subscription approach, and they transform into a more traditional approach with dealer networks, with more than one models, BEVs and hybrid. And we had found a solution with them to a multi-country and rather standardized approach, which helped them to make it more easy to deploy to different markets. More easy and a bit faster through a centralized organization. And the second example is more on an individual market basis. It's probably Cherry Group in the UK, which has been growing very fast, started a bit more than 1 year ago. Market share, depending on the month, around 3% right now. The most successful plug-in hybrid in the UK in the last month. This has been growing very, very fast. And I think the success factors, both on Cherry Group side, starting with Omoda first, then Jaguar brand, and then Cherry brand, was to focus very much on the distribution network, the selection of the dealers, the support of the dealers, making commercial means available to launch the activity, make fleet buyers and private buyers test the cars, love the cars, and buy the cars. So those are two examples. I would say we have tried to support as much as we can the manufacturers, and the results are rather positive so far.
That's great. So thanks a lot for your insight, Roddy. I think there are a few other questions, but we'll come back to those at the end.
Yeah, thank you, Amelia. Yes, and let's consolidate the questions for our panel at the end. So I think, thank you so much, Ronnie, for your first industry perspective. And let's move now to the second industry perspective with Christophe de Perna. Please go ahead.
Good. Yeah, good morning.
Hi.
Go ahead,
Hi,
Amelia. Hi.
So we're going to start with a similar question to Ronnie, but from your perspective, obviously you've seen Chinese players in Europe, but also Chinese players in China, and you've done quite a lot of work in the Chinese market as well. From those experiences, maybe starting more broadly before we get into just the insurance specific view, what is it from your perspective that you think makes Chinese OEMs so special? Can be positively or negatively special, but what makes them so special as a cohort?
There's a factual data that makes them special. They represent 1/3 of the global car market. So at some stage, they might have done something that they have learned very well from all the joint venture that have been actually made in China. So their capacity to understand, transform, and speed up the industry has been second to none. And actually as well, the other key success factors that the European OEM now are trying to find out in China are the ecosystem and let's say the interaction that they have developed so that they can develop cars in less than 2 years. So that's been they are able to align all the rank one suppliers, the tech, the connectivity. So really this is something that would be the positive out of it, because in terms of product, price, features, they have reached a very high level. And in terms of production, they have also developed some very advanced, let's say, gigafactories. I mean, we knew the name from Tesla, but at least they have also put that in a different scale. So let's say on the hardware and software side, they have done well. Then now on the distribution, China is one specific market, and Europe, as mentioned by Ronnie, I mean, it's also a very scattered 27 different ways of cooking the same dish, meaning that what is a motor insurance in Italy or in France or in Germany or in the UK is not exactly the same. And China is starting from a tariff-based approach of insurance and is starting from a level where OEM are not allowed to make commission on insurance. So it does not, to make the link with the insurance question, it does not push the Chinese to OEM to really deal with insurance the same way. They use insurance as a commodity. whereby we are moving towards partnership, and they are in need of that in Europe. So it's a, let's say, moving to Europe from what they know from China is actually a very strong learning curve. And so not only in distribution, in finance, it's also a challenge because we've said the market is not meant to grow. So accordingly, how to fight in a, let's say, stable or decreasing market with existing players who will not, die without a big fight. So Europe will be an interesting challenge for them, and insurance, incidentally, is coming. It's something that they have now to consider a little bit more than what they would do in China.
And as you said, as the kind of insurance angle or the active involvement in the insurance value chain is somewhat new to them, how do you see players currently considering that European insurance strategy?
I've seen a question in the, Chinese OEM are very transactional. So of course, if you deal with them, they want cheap. Let's put it that way, to make and not to be derogatory to them, but they want something super competitive. So they give you big volume, but they give you a cheap price. Doesn't work that way. So the one who get who play that game are losing big amount of money. And by the way, the Chinese insurance companies are on motor business are not making big money because the impact of the mix of electric vehicle actually has put their profitability in a red zone. So really on the insurance side, we need a lot of data, which we don't have too much. So that's why we are happy to partner with them to jointly learn together and get some data and some risk analysis. But at the end of the day, it's really a win-win strategy. In Europe, what is very different from China is the total cost of ownership is probably as important as the price of the car. So meaning that you can have a very appealing product and features, but if your insurance is 3-4 times higher than the current competitor's price, then you have to think about it. And all this is linked to parts supply chain, repairability, connectivity of the cars to some services and so on. So there's a lot of things that they have to adjust to Europe, and there's a lot of things that we are happy to work with them, but they are also learning here. And so the insurance business is something that they have to put on their plate as well as a learning curve.
And I think you touched on it a little bit there, but when you think about the Chinese OEMs from an insurance perspective, obviously insurance business model is already going through quite a lot of uncertainty and upheaval with EVs generally. Do you then see a kind of a further structural difference on these Chinese models in terms of the insurance business, let's say economics, or is it mostly EV that's driving all of that change?
The EV is really what drives the change. When 20 or 30% of the car value is represented by the battery. I mean, the battery itself, the repairability of the batteries, how the battery is managed is really a key topic. But because this is what create the big topics for the Chinese insurers in China. I mean, this is where replacing batteries is, when you have an insurance, average insurance premium in Europe is, let's say, 600 euros. A battery could be easily 10,000-15,000 euros. So to pay back a battery on an insurance premium is going to take many years. So fundamentally, there is something new here, which is the battery. So whether it is Chinese or not doesn't make a big change. As you know, 60 or 70% of the batteries worldwide are Chinese made. So really, what matters is how they will set up, let's say, battery repair facilities in Europe, because it's not easy. So really, the battery is a key topic. Having said so, as Ronnie said, the battery seems also quite reliable and. It's only in case of accident that there might be some serious damage on the cost perspective. But there's no big difference between a Chinese OEM in terms of EV and a European OEM in terms of EVs. I think the fundamental issue remains the repairability. So really supply of parts and transfer price of parts and the capacity of repairing these cars is really what matters. As I said earlier on, they are super agile, the Chinese OEM. They bring countless numbers of new products. And so this creates also a diversity that everyone has to work with, because the economy of scale is not there yet. So you have to invest a lot of money for very little volume. So I guess this is also a bottleneck that they have to take into consideration.
And for insurers who are specifically thinking about working with Chinese OEMs, what do you think kind of the requirements are there, and how similar are they to other integrated partnerships you may have had for a long time, or do they have very kind of specific needs beyond the getting them beyond the transactional, I would say. So if we really talk about partnerships.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, yes, I mean, first you need to have a lot of patience, but we are happy to work with them. We work with many of them. We are really working on the partnership approach because there's no other way forward. And we leverage that from our, let's say, micro-mobility expertise or experience. I mean, we were one of the key leader in micro-mobility insurance, where every 3 months you open the book with your B partners and you say, well, listen, this is the way it works on your portfolio, so this is the adjustment we have to make. And I guess this is something that we are also working with them, changing a little bit the way we used to work with, let's say, legacy OEM, whereby we have data, as we know more or less the profile of customers. We have a lot of information that allows us to have a proper algorithm. With Chinese OEM is a bit more a jump into the unknown. And so as such, we offer some, let's say, partnership approach in a sense that we are more dynamic on the pricing, upwards or downwards, but mostly upwards as they would experience it. So that's why we will never go for a cheap offer, because that's not something that is sustainable. The customer wants to make sure that his car is being repaired in case of accident and so on, and we want to make sure that we are able to provide that in due time with proper supply chain, proper capabilities of repairs and stuff like that. So really, it's a partnership approach. They have a capillarity issue in terms of after-sales network. I mean, it's good to have a point of sales, but they need to have proper repair capabilities. And as you know, insurers do have their own network as well, so we can also complement some of their offers. So that's why it has to be partnership. First of all, because it's an investment from our end, but at the same time, it's also an investment that is worthy from their end, because it brings peace of mind to customers. You put a big name like us or BNP or whomever else in the insurance or finance industries behind them, so they need that kind of credibility as well. So we are not naive, but we are very much working on a very respectful and professional partnership.
Okay, that's great. Maybe just one last question before we go towards the panel questions. Obviously, at the moment, we've been talking more about what does it mean for what the Chinese players need. Do you think there'll be assuming that what we talked about at the beginning of the slide, we end up with 15-25% market share of the Chinese in the next 5 years? Do you think it will have an impact on kind of the landscape of the traditional the traditional insurance players in Europe today?
Insurance players, I don't think so that much. First of all, because there's still 300 million cars on the market. So for the next 5 years, it's not going to have a massive impact, I would say. But I would say that it's time to own some territories and to learn from these new entry players. And one should never actually probably underestimate the capabilities they would have to innovate on the way to distribute products. The way they have transformed the automotive industry from, let's say, an ICE, non-communicative cars to a software-defined vehicle, high-end techs, 5 years ahead of Europe. It's not me saying it, it's most of the CEOs of OEM in Europe. So really, we have to be extremely cautious, not being condescendent on that, and keep doing proper market intelligence and watching what they are doing. But fundamentally, from an insurance perspective, it's time to own some territories, because the EV, based on the European regulation, whether it's going to be mixed or not mixed by 2035, is a no-brainer. So the more you are able to let's say, to capitalize on data that you can get from these brands, the better it is. I think one of the key topics or key difficulties for insurers in Europe would be the diversity. I mean, there's like 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 new players with each of them 2 or 3 brands. So really, this diversity is maybe good for the end consumers, but it might be a little bit more complex for the industry players like us, because it really requires a lot of effort and a lot of investment to monitor all this diversity. So I don't see that as the next big phase, it will be autonomous driving. So just to throw a perspective, and that's something that is more damaging, I would say, for the insurance industry than the electric vehicle itself. The thing is that if you really want to be competitive on decarbonation of the automotive industry, you need to find out a proper way to have a proper insurance or total cost of ownership that would match the capabilities of purchasing of European customers. So I think it's a joint effort from all OEMs and Chinese also in particulars to make sure that the electric cars are affordable. And then for us also that they are easily repairable, mostly on the battery side. So we see some start of state of health insurance and state of health extension of warranty. So this is a good start. But I guess speed is also what matters here. And European speed is great, but Chinese speed is fantastic. So let's make sure that we probably speed up a little bit of our own European ways to cater for this. Not invasion, but a really strong push from a bigger, let's say, the West used to go to East, and East now is coming West. So that's something we have to really cater for.
Makes sense. Okay, thanks very much for your input, Christophe. I think there are some questions, but we'll try and tackle them in a few minutes. I think now we have the second poll, right, Sylvia?
Yeah, thank you for that, Amelia. Thank you, Christophe. So yeah, let's go to the second poll. We can gather input again from all the participants. I think thank you, by the way, for joining. We're close to 100 people, so that's great. And here you have our second poll questions about your insight about what you are seeing or expecting to be the main differentiator. So how to the conversation we just had, right? How are you seeing them compete against the European players? And I will hand over to Marcus to comment on the poll, as well as then we will transition to the panel. So Marcus, I think the battery and software seems to be the winners initially.
Yeah, so that's a bit like commenting a horse race, so while it's unfolding. But Amelia and I, we talked about this yesterday, and I mean, cost position is a bit an obvious one, right? And there has been a lot of discussion about subsidies or not, but if you look at it, I mean, there's a technological element of low cost of EVs, especially, that's unfolding. So, I mean, I would be surprised if cost doesn't come up first, and I think it's on the way. Speed to market, yes, definitely. But this is also somehow linked to technology, interestingly, because EVs, SDV-based EVs are much faster to both develop and then also to produce. Battery technology, obviously, coming from BYD and an enormous dominance of Chinese besides Koreans in batteries. So all of this makes sense. And then obviously software. So Christophe has started to throw yet another big stone into the pool with the autonomous driving. But it's not only autonomous, it's the entire software where you actually have a sort of personal autonomy, not only robotaxis. And this is not completely on the radar yet, but I think this is going to be at least as disruptive as the pure electromobility space. So horses have arrived, cost position first. Okay, no big surprise. It's a bit of surprise that there are 23% who don't mention it first, or who don't mention it. Then battery, speed to market, software. I mean, all of this makes sense. Supply chain, sales channels. Obviously, that's one of the difficulties. I mean, if you look at the question, this could actually differentiate. So I'm pretty sure that the Chinese player who actually figures out a bit, as Ronnie said about Chery in the UK, figures out how to not only be good in the upstream product side, but also understands how to integrate this into a very mature European ecosystem. I mean, definitely that would have a hugely differentiating impact. Yes, so good results. Happy about them.
Thank you for that, Marcus. Thank you for the commentary. And I welcome our speakers and Sheen also to join us for the panel. I think we have several questions already in the chat. And I think, well, some of the topics, right, we have been going through those a little bit during the conversation. But I think, Marcus, maybe we can take them for the top. Like the first one we had, is about the channels, right? That the Chinese OEMs are actually selling cars in. So, for example, there's a mention of in Germany, right? There's a massive penetration of 0-kilometer and rental sales. Maybe it's a good question just to start the ideas flowing. What are you seeing as the main channels, right, for the Chinese OEMs really into Europe? And like many of you already commented, per country probably, but even might be different, right, in their approach. So please go ahead with that. And maybe Marcus, if you'd like to moderate the panel.
Yeah. So this first question here, is there any insight from your side, Christoph, Ronnie, Shin?
Maybe I'll take my former OEM hat on that one, because basically they have to deal with the massive stock they have to push. I guess this is the new way for them to learn how to do supply chain, because they are exporting massively and then they have to get rid of the cars. I mean, really pushing metal is what they do. And I guess they use all the good old tricks that European OEM have used in the past, 0 kilometers, demo cars. So I guess for the time being, it's probably a wrong, let's say, assessment of what is really needed, and they are pushing. That's my view.
Yes,
Ronnie?
I've seen the question from James. I think I agree with what's happening in Germany for maybe not all of them, but some of them in terms of 0 kilometers. It's definitely the wrong strategy. I agree. It's a very short-term oriented strategy. And it will be a disaster for the leasing product for next year, because the residuals are going to get down. Because if you sell only 0 kilometers with a price tag 25% below the new car price, then it's not good for residual values. And European manufacturers have learned this. But I would invite you to have a look at other markets, especially the markets who don't have strong local brands. The markets where the Chinese are doing rather well are the UK, Spain, and Poland. In Spain, if I'm not mistaken, last month, the market share of Chinese manufacturers in the private market was 17%. And in both markets, the market share of the Chinese manufacturers is above 10 in UK and Spain. So they succeed, and they succeed in the retail sector as well. So I would see Germany, and for some manufacturers, Italy, as an exception, because in some other markets, the retail is doing rather well. And for me, one of the key, I was a bit disappointed by the vote just before. For me, one of the key success factors of some Chinese brands is the sales channel strategy and the focus on dealers. European manufacturers 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, said the dealers will die, dealers will not exist anymore. Chinese manufacturers coming to Europe did exactly the same, the contrary. They went to the dealerships, proposed very attractive packages to the dealers, and were able to have a dealer network very fast in most of the countries. So for me, one of their key success factors is the dealer focus and dealers starting to earn money with those products. I would not underestimate this topic.
And I think indeed, Ronnie, perhaps just to build on this, I agree that a lot of the issues that we actually described before are not only Chinese issues, they're also European issues. Right, because if you look at EV, at the insurance, at the battery cost, and so on, I mean, it's not that the European OEMs have this figured out. And Ronnie, if you look at the agent model hype at one moment, I mean, everyone believed to be Tesla, because obviously Tesla managed the direct model, but people now see that not everyone is Tesla, and especially if you have a legacy, it's a different thing. So definitely there's a question about how to sell. And I think there's no solution without pain, because obviously if you then go into the dealer network, you need to build it up. You need to remunerate the dealer, but okay, that's the historic choice. I think the rental car channel, which has been managed in the question, the rental car companies that have gone there have come back from this. There are huge write-offs because not only the RV problem, if the rental car companies had vehicles on their balance sheets, but there's also the utilization rate because of the topics of after sales and so on. If you cannot repair a car quickly and bring it back on the roads, then it means that for rental car companies who normally need about, say, 85-90% of utilization rates, they end up with 50%, and it's not good enough. So you see, there's no silver bullet to get this done. And so actually that's why it does require some thinking and work how to get the car sold, definitely. I would perhaps go on with another thing that if you look at the survey we just did, the poll, I think what's interesting is that you actually need to make it work, right? Because we know that the Chinese, they have engaged very strongly into Europe. So I mean, they need to make it work in one way or the other. I think also the banks and the insurers need to make it work, because if they do get 35% of market share, you cannot simply say it's not for us, because as both of you say, Ronnie and Christophe, the market is not going to pull us out of it. It's going to remain stagnant. So there is a common fate, a joint fate, that you need to make this work. And I think this is, from my point of view, an important takeaway. And now the question I would have to both of you and also to Shin, the big issue of this is that there's this uncertainty. There's the uncertainty of EVs. There's the uncertainty of how the European market is going to play out with the regulation. There is the uncertainty of how the Chinese OEMs, how persistent they're going to be. So uncertainty is going to be a lot. So what do you think your role is in this, Christophe and Ronnie? Is it to also take uncertainty? Is it to help your partners manage uncertainty? How do you position in this as a partner?
Okay, maybe I start. As I was saying, I mean, it's a partnership approach. For us, it's either first to isolate the Chinese risk at some stage. So it's also to work out with our operating entities in each and every countries to make sure that we are putting that, let's say, risk under control. So that's internal aspect. But fundamentally, we are not venturing into this new OEM ground without involving them. I mean, it's really a win-win situation. If they are able to share the right amount of data, if they are able to provide us a good penetration ratio, if they are able to provide us good supply of parts and so on, I mean, this is a win-win situation. So this, they understand it because it's very factual and they can see it on their total cost of ownership. So that's also as Ronnie was saying, I mean, maybe of course they are pushing cars because they are maybe overstock and so on, but they are becoming very fast, very, very sensitive about the total cost of ownership and brand value, because they understand this is the key entry factors for Europe. Otherwise, it could be a splash in the pan with only price and product. So partnership, we have dedicated team dealing with that in Alliance Partners.
I agree on that. It can only go through partnerships. You can have a quick start, a rather opportunistic start, probably, which is okay for 1 year. But then you need to build a long-term strategy, and you need both to engage. When we talk about industrial risk, electrification is an industrial risk. So each one has to take a part of it. And Christophe was mentioning the insurance topic. It's very important to be aware about the spare parts, about repair cost. Some, let's say, repair cost strategies of some manufacturers might not be today where they should be. So they're working on this. And we can help. It's very important to have a conversation with the Chinese, but with each of our partners, we have a very, very deep conversations about how we can help them to survive in this very complicated market, because it's not only the Chinese, it's the European manufacturers, it's the Korean manufacturers, Americans. The market is difficult for everybody.
So Shin, what's your view then on this? From China, because you know what's going on in the head of the Chinese OEMs and captives. They look at Europe, they see all of this uncertainty, and what are their hopes from their partners? What are their expectations? Are there any ideas from your side?
I cannot speak for all the Chinese away, but I just share my view when I talk with them. So first of all, I think number one is that yes, there's a short-term pain. Yes, there is a zero kilometer cost. That is all driven by there is a very high target to achieve in terms of the global sales. That's how the Chinese people or Chinese enterprises are, usually would take. They take some short-term actions which might sort of affect the long-term value. However, if there's we tend to chase for some big targets, and by all means as necessary. So that one, as Europeans, we probably have to not live with that, but understand that. And secondly, Europe market, as far as I know, will remain as a key market for all the Chinese OEMs, especially for those ones that's aiming for a long-term development, in a very long-term development in the auto industry. So, and you probably have already noticed that there's quite a lot of investment happening or planned in the European market, just working on the manufacturing, working on the production, working on the after sales parts, sales parts and so on and so forth. And more to follow in terms of the building up the whole ecosystem, putting the financial services in place, and so on and so forth. And that's the second thing I want to say. And the third one is that in Europe, I think there's already a consensus, like the Chinese OEM cannot do all the things by themselves, especially on the whole ecosystem, after market stream and so on. So they're based on, if you look at some recent engagement like the Ronnie had, or and also the other the leading company had, there's quite a lot of partnerships happening in the mobility ecosystem built out together with basically Chinese OEM. So I think it's really a matter of understanding the value, adjusting the way, or finding the balance of working with the different cultures and different the values, and then finding the way, from the business point of view, finding the way to benefit to both sides. And because at the end of the day, what I want to say is Europe will remain as a key market for majority of the Chinese OEM, together with financial services. However, financial services, the captives in China, I think they will have some difficulty entering the European market, despite the maturity of this market. However, there's quite a lot of process and a lot of regulation they have to go through, and also quite a lot of lessons to be learned. So in that case, as you can see, all the Chinese OEM right now tend to work with the local leading financial services partners, such as the leading banks, right, and also the leading companies as well as the insurance company. So that one I don't really worry about too much, at least in the short term. However, if we're putting into longer term, from the group development point of view, the captives in China, probably they will want to take sort of a share, or take to be involved in this ecosystem build up, but we will see. It will be a long process, because right now, the China regulation potentially stops the AFC in China to invest in the overseas markets, especially in Europe. So I don't see that happening. I don't see that as a threat for at least for you guys as a partner. But what I want to really emphasize is the determination of the market, for the market development in Europe for those Chinese OEM, and secondly, on the investment level, there will be some local investment. So I think they're trying to copy and paste potentially what Toyota did back to 20 years ago, right? Toyota is a Japanese brand, but a lot of European believes that it's a local brand. So that is because they invest heavily, build up the supply chain, build up the factories in Europe. That is the key to win. And I think some of this idea has already passed along to the leaders of the Chinese OEMs. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
thank you very much for all the input. And I think maybe it might be time to start wrapping up, right? As we are on the top of the hour. I see some questions in the chat about legislation, but maybe, Marcus, we can also take those in our next webinar, right? Because I think we have one more before Christmas. So I don't know if you have some final words to wrap up today.
Also, yeah, and Sylvia, also happy to take this directly. I think it's from you, James. And I think there's a new regulation that is supposed to come out on the 10th of December. I think that's the one, Ronnie, that you alluded to, which again can change quite a bit what's going on. So happy to take this up. No one knows what's going to come out, and it's not going to be final, but obviously you need to observe it in order to be prepared. As the saying is, hope for the best and prepare for the worst. So it's really a good motto in the current auto market. Yes, Sylvia, sorry.
Oh, no problem. Perfect. I think it's a great also transition to, like I said, our next webinar will be December 16th. So we really welcome everyone again to join us, to ask questions, to be participant. I think this was a great session. So I just want also to remind everyone that in the Chorus website, you have access to all the upcoming events, but also the reports, different reports that have been published. So for example, the latest one was the CBA wrap-up report on the latest trends, which also, if you have not downloaded it yet, I would really recommend doing so. And with that, I will just want to thank everyone for attending today. Thank you to the speakers. I think it was a great session. I'm looking forward to the next one. Thank you very much. See you in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.
Thank
See
you.
next month.
Thank you. Bye.
Hello, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.